So one of the things I'm frequently reminding meditators is that meditation isn't just about the moment that you sit down to practice. Meditation isn't just that hour that you do a week. Meditation is all those things that come before, all those things that you've been doing, all those things that you've been saying, even those things that you've been thinking about. All of this activity will have an impact on the mind. And these are the things that we start to notice when we sit down. These are the things that affect us in our meditation, the things that our mind gravitates to. Oh, I did that thing wrong. Oh, I hurt that person's feeling. Oh, I said really bad words to that person and now I feel terrible. Oh, I stole that thing and now I'm worried that the police are going to find me. These kinds of things, if we're doing these things in our life, then of course they're going to have an impact in our meditation. Of course they're going to have some sort of result in the mind. We're going to feel bad. We're going to feel guilty. We're going to feel a sense of moral shame for our actions. So this is a problem for us as meditators, because these things are rattling around inside our brain and we can't get a moment of peace. And so when we start to see like this, that these are the things that are coming up in our practice, that these are the things that are distracting us from peace and causing us suffering, then we can start to understand why the Buddha talked about ethical conduct as being the basis of the path, the foundation. Because if we can develop good, wholesome, skillful ethical conduct, then when it comes time to sit, we feel good, we feel great. We haven't hurt anyone. We haven't got anything to be blamed for. We don't have anything to regret. And then we can get very deep in our practice because we're not being buffeted by these actions that we've done, the reverberations in our mind, hurting us, distracting us, making us feel bad. And this is the topic that's demonstrated in this beautiful sutta we're going to look at, called the Cetanākaraṇīyasutta, which is in the Anguttara Nikaya 11.2 is the sutta that we're going to be looking at today. And actually, there's a few suttas next door to this in the Anguttara 11s. There's one just before, which is called something like, what is the purpose? And that is Ananda saying to the Buddha, what is the purpose of developing good ethical conduct? And there's another one afterwards called Vital Conditions, where the variety of arahants, actually, in different suttas following, talk about the vital conditions necessary for success on the spiritual path. And they all start with this ethical conduct, sila. And there's other suttas similar to this one in the Anguttara 10s as well. So these ideas appear over and over again in the Buddhist path. And the sequence that we're going to discover in this sutta appears over and over again in the path. And so it's very good to become familiar with this sequence. And that's why I often teach this sutta. So I'm going to read through it first, and you can read along if you've got it, or you can just listen. And so I'm reading Bhante Suchārya's translation here. And it starts off, Mendicants, an ethical person who has fulfilled ethical conduct need not make a wish. And this is the wish. May I have no regrets. It's only natural that an ethical person has no regrets. When you have no regrets, you need not make a wish. May I feel joy. It's only natural that joy springs up when you have no regrets. And when you feel joy, you don't need to make a wish. May I experience rapture. It's only natural that rapture arises when you're joyful. When your mind is full of rapture, you need not make a wish. May my body become tranquil. It's only natural that your body becomes tranquil when your mind is full of rapture. When your body is tranquil, you do not need to make a wish. May I feel bliss. It's only natural to feel bliss when your body is tranquil. And when you feel bliss, you need not make a wish. May my mind be immersed in samadhi. It's only natural for the mind to become immersed in samadhi when you feel bliss. When your mind is immersed in samadhi, you need not make a wish. May I truly know and see. It's only natural to truly know and see when your mind is immersed in samadhi. When you truly know and see, you need not make a wish. May I grow disillusioned. It's only natural to grow disillusioned when you truly know and see. When you're disillusioned, you need not make a wish. May I become dispassionate. It's only natural to grow dispassionate when you're disillusioned. And when you're dispassionate, you need not make a wish. May I realize the knowledge and vision of freedom. It's only natural to realize the knowledge and vision of freedom when you're dispassionate. And so, mendicants, the knowledge and vision of freedom is the purpose and benefit of dispassion. Dispassion is the purpose and benefit of disillusionment. Disillusionment is the purpose and benefit of truly knowing and seeing. Truly knowing and seeing is the purpose and benefit of immersion, samadhi. Samadhi is the purpose and benefit of bliss. Bliss is the purpose and benefit of tranquility. Tranquility is the purpose and benefit of rapture. Rapture is the purpose and benefit of joy. Joy is the purpose and benefit of not having regrets, and not having regrets is the purpose and benefit of skillful ethics. And so, mendicants, good qualities flow on and fill up from one to the other, for going from the near shore to the far shore. And so this is a very beautiful sequence of events. And this is a sequence that occurs, as it says in the sutta, naturally, dharmata, naturally. And it occurs based on causes and conditions. So if you can cast your mind way back to the beginning of this talk when I mentioned the farmer and their crops. Remember, we had to prepare the soil, plant the seed, water, and let the water out. Even though the farmer had put those conditions and causes into place, the farmer couldn't make the crop grow fast, couldn't tell the crops, quick, grow now, flower, quick, ripen up so I can harvest you. This is not possible. That goes against nature. It's not possible to force things. It's not possible to make things happen like that. But what we can do is put the causes and conditions into place that are going to guarantee that that crop will ripen. And this is how the Buddha talked in that sutta. So we can't force these wonderful changes to happen, but we can put the causes and conditions in place that allows for that process to occur. So this is important, and this is the same with the sutta that we're looking at now. We can't force the spiritual path to happen. We can't just make it happen by wishing really hard. May I have great meditation. May I realize freedom and liberation. You can't just wish for this to happen. It doesn't happen by itself. It doesn't happen through willpower. It doesn't happen through chance. It happens when the causes and conditions are in place. And that's why at the very bottom of this list, the first thing on this list is ethical conduct. And this ethical behavior, morality, being good, doing good actions, doing good things, saying good things, not lying, I'll go through the list in a second. All of these things, these are going to help us develop the path. So they're not something separate to our path. They're not something separate to our meditation. They're not something separate to our goal of enlightenment. These are the things that are going to help us, that are going to create a foundation that will support and nourish our practice. And that's why we develop these things. So when we think about ethics and morality, as I mentioned before, sometimes we just think about rules, or we think about people telling us we have to do this and we have to do that. We think about regulations. Maybe when we hear the word ethics, sometimes we think about these protocols or mechanisms that we have for oversight committees in research or government. Maybe it doesn't ring true to us that this is something that we should kind of cultivate internally. And I remember ages ago I looked up the difference between morality and ethics, because I thought there was this great big difference. And I found some sites kind of talking about how ethics are internal and come from within, and how morality is something that kind of is shaped by society. And then I found other sites that said that morality is something that comes from within, and ethics is something that's kind of put on us from the outside. And so you see these terms are often used interchangeably. I usually use the term ethical conduct because I feel that morality has this kind of maybe slightly churchy feeling about it, that morals are something that are imposed. This is the way I understand it in the context that I've grown up in. Maybe it's completely different to you. It doesn't matter how you call it. The simplest way to look at it is just to think of it of being good, being a good person. So whether we want to call it ethics, morality, whatever, sila, just being a good person is what we're aiming for. And we're aiming for this in our conduct. So it should show up somewhere in our life. It should show up especially in our relationships with other people. Because in Buddhism, what is good, what a good person is, what is good practice, is someone who's practicing for their own welfare, their own well-being, and the well-being of others. So it's not enough just to practice only for yourself. It's not also enough just to practice for others, to be a martyr, to be the bodhisattva. You need to practice for yourself and for others. This is the definition of good conduct, something that benefits you and something that benefits others. This is really important. And so where should this show up? This should show up in our observation of the precepts that we keep, and not just the precepts, hopefully. So the precepts, the 5 precepts that you follow, perhaps as a lay Buddhist, are to not kill, to not steal, to not commit sexual misconduct, to not use wrong speech, to not take intoxicants like alcohol that confuse the mind. So already it's sounding pretty negative, isn't it? It's like, not, don't. But the reason we practice in this way is we can put a positive spin on these things. So when we practice not killing, it's not only this restraint that we're doing, this action of not doing, but it's something that we're providing, which is fearlessness, security, safety for others. When we don't steal, we're providing others with this feeling of comfort and peace in themselves, that the things that they have will not be taken away from them. And we do this because we know how it feels to have something stolen from us. We wouldn't want that to happen to ourselves. So we restrain ourselves. We restrain that desire to take something that doesn't belong to us. So we're protecting ourselves because we don't get punished by guilt and remorse. We don't get punished by the law if we get caught. And so we protect ourselves, and we protect the other person's goods. We protect their feelings and their possessions. So this is the way this ethical conduct works. I don't want to talk too much about it because it's late here in Sydney, and I want to get back to the sutta. But the thing that I want to most take for you to take away from the practice of ethics is that it gives rise to certain mind states. So if we do things that cause harm to others, then there will be a reverberation in our mind. If we hurt someone, then we will feel bad about that. And anyone who's done a little bit of meditation knows just how these reverberations can echo through the mind. And if you think about the big picture of our life, then in those moments when we most want peace and calm and stillness, we want to have as little reverberation from negative actions going on as possible. And certainly at the end of our life, we don't want to have those things that cause us regret, remorse, shame, guilt, pain, suffering. We don't want those things flipping up into our mind. We don't want our mind to be overcome by those bad qualities. So instead, we want to make sure as much as possible that we live well, we live a good life, an ethical life, a life that is beneficial to ourselves and to others, and which doesn't allow for the possibility of regret and remorse to arise in the mind, as far as possible. Now, it's very important to say at this stage of the talk that we all make mistakes, that it's very easy for us, if we're not careful, to do something that hurts someone. It's quite possible for us to break a precept. It's okay. Just remember this, it's okay. The way to deal with this is to acknowledge it. Ah, right, so I did that thing that hurt someone. I did something that makes me feel guilty. Ah, so that's the feeling I've got right now. It's pretty yucky. I don't feel good. I don't want to feel like this again. So in the future, I'll try really hard to restrain myself. And this is something that we acknowledge as monks and nuns. We're not perfect either. We try really hard. We've got a lot more rules to follow. And there's sometimes where we will break a precept. And the method the Buddha laid down for us is not to beat yourself with a stick and put yourself in the naughty corner and put a hat of shame on. Instead, what we need to do is just acknowledge that fault. We need to acknowledge that. And by doing this, we can free ourselves from that. We free ourselves from that pain because we acknowledge it. We understand, this was the wrong thing. And this, knowing this, acknowledging this, is much better than never acknowledging it at all. It's much better to know that we've done something wrong than to not know that we've done something wrong. It's only when we acknowledge in this way that we can work towards overcoming it in the future. So if you make a mistake, if you break a precept accidentally, then it's okay. You're not a bad Buddhist. You don't have to give up on the whole path because of one small thing. Just acknowledge it and forgive yourself. This is very important. Forgive yourself. Don't beat yourself up about it. What's done is done. We put it in the past. And we try really hard in the future to restrain ourselves. So this is how we handle those things. So just remember, no one's perfect, and it's likely that we'll mess up somehow in our life. But as you practice the spiritual path, you'll see that over time, by being aware of these things, by watching your ethical conduct, by adhering to an ethical conduct code, you're more likely to reduce those situations where you've caused pain to someone else, we've hurt someone, we've done something that you feel guilty or bad about. And so this is actually a good thing. So over time, you'll see that the practice of observing your precepts, of being a good person, leads to a lot of joy and happiness in your life and reduction of those unwholesome qualities that cause suffering. But it's also very important when we're practicing in this way not to become complacent about our precepts, not just to observe them without thinking about them. It's quite easy. There's probably millions of people in the world who follow those precepts slightly accidentally. They don't drink, they try not to lie, they just try to be a good person, and they're not using it in a way that will push them further along the spiritual path. So we should remember that karma is intention. So we want to intentionally work with this goodness, these good qualities, these ethical behaviors. We want to be aware that we're doing them. And this awareness is what lifts our consciousness, which will push us further along the spiritual path. And that's why the Buddha recommended a practice like sila nusati, where we consciously turn our mind to recollecting this good virtuous conduct. So it's something to be aware of. If you're practicing the Buddha's path, then it's good to celebrate when you're a good person. It's good. It's a good thing. Here at the monastery at the end of the world, I live with Bhante Sujato, and sometimes I'll say, "Oh, I did this thing, I feel good." And he's like, "Yes, good, very good. You did really well. You're a good person." And I say, "Yes, I am a good person." And it feels great. It lifts my spirit, makes me feel like I'm living a good life, a spiritual life. So if someone says to you, "Oh, you're a good person," don't do this false modesty thing. "Oh, no, it's not me. I'm terrible. I'm awful." No, this is something we should celebrate in ourselves and celebrate in others. So the purpose of sila, the purpose of ethical conduct, is to develop a mind that has no regrets. So this is the word avipattisaro. And this is a beautiful idea, this concept, that if we have good ethical conduct, then we'll have less suffering, less regret and remorse in the mind. This word actually, vipatti, kind of comes from this idea of agitation. And I think when we meditate, we can see how this works in the mind. We keep going back to this thing that we did, keep going back to that quality of wrongness, and it churns us up a little bit, and we return to it over and over again. And when we're agitated, we don't get a moment's peace. And so if we have non-regret in the mind, then we're already doing really well, aren't we? If we have no regrets in our mind, then our heart is already starting to open up and become really pure and really lovely. And this is already, we're only at step 2 of this sutta. Only at step 2. But already we have this beautiful mind state of non-regret. And so this is something to celebrate, You have good ethical behavior, you get non-regret, feels good. We're already starting to come out of our suffering. And when someone has non-regret in the mind, what happens? Joy appears naturally. So this appears all by itself. We can't force it. Like a flower, we can't force it to open all by itself. It has to open up naturally. It opens up again, that same image of the crops in the field based on causes and conditions when the time is right. So when we have non-regret in our mind, naturally, all by itself, joy appears. So this is pamuja, which is the Pali term for joy, and already we're starting to develop very pleasant mind states based on that ethical good conduct. So we shouldn't be afraid of this pleasure in meditation. So some people teach, if there's any good feelings, any pleasure, then just get rid of it, throw it away. Just be equanimous and don't allow yourself to feel any goodness. And this is, of course, not at all how the Buddha taught. So when we experience this joy, it's something really beautiful. You feel lifted. The mind is already starting to brighten up, and we're already moving in the direction of other wholesome states. So it's very easy when we develop this joy to get deeper in our practice, as we'll see. And that's why many good teachers that I've encountered, like Ajahn Brahm, Ajahn Brahmali, Bhante Sujato, they often talk about the importance of developing joy. Just as long as you can get that joy in your meditation, then anything is possible. I feel very sorry for people who don't get this joy in their meditation. And I think if you're one of those people, then just look at your conduct. Look at the way you've been acting, the interaction you have, the conversations you have, the things that you do, the people you hang out with. All of these things will affect the ability for joy to arise. But of course, the most important one is to have that kind of clean, open slate of non-regret based on good conduct. There's many other ways that joy will arise. It could be based on faith, it could be based on things like the recollection of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, remembering good spiritual friendship. There's so many different ways that joy can arise, but it's a very important stage of our meditation. So we try to develop joy in the mind. And when we do, we find that this joy very quickly deepens and becomes even more pleasurable. So we go from pamuja to piti. So piti is often translated, so this is piti, P-I-T-I, not piti with a Y. Piti is often translated in so many different ways, sometimes as rapture, sometimes as thrill or zest, sometimes as exaltation. So it doesn't matter really how it's translated. More important is to understand what it is. So it's a kind of feeling that we experience both in the mind and also in the body. And so we feel it like little tingles going up the skin. We feel it like a rush of pleasant sensations through the body and in the mind. There's many different types of piti, and they can become quite intense, so that you're even rocking forward and backwards, or in the suttas it mentions this kind of piti that lifts you up, and I think this is the one that will help you levitate, maybe. So very strong forms of piti, very minor forms of piti, and it's good to experience this sensation, because this piti acts as a kind of glue. once you've got a bit of a rush of pleasant sensations in the body, the mind latches on. It's like, whoa, what's happening here? It suddenly becomes interested, suddenly becomes involved. And so piti has this function of sticking the mind onto the object of meditation. It promotes interest. And so there's a later image, I think that Buddhaghosa or one of the commentators used to describe this combination of feelings, piti sukha. And piti, of course, is that zest, that rapture, that excitement. And the sukha is that pleasure, that bliss. And these terms are often used together. We always have sukha when there is piti. We always have this pleasant experience when the piti is present. But we don't always have sukha with piti. We can have sukha without piti. And I'll get to that in a few minutes. But this image is very beautiful that the commentator used, which is the image of someone who is thirsty and hot and walking through a desert, and they see someone coming towards them who's just been to a lovely cool oasis and had a bit of a bath. So you're hot and thirsty and you think, I would like to go there. And so you get interested, you get excited, and you start moving towards that oasis. And you're anticipating, you're kind of thrilled by this idea. And then you get in there and you have a nice bath and you're cool and you're feeling really good. And this is the mixture of the piti and the bliss, the sukha. And then afterwards you get out and you kind of dry off and then you lie down in the shade. And this is when we no longer have any anticipation, we no longer have that thrill, that piti. Instead we're just experiencing this pure bliss, this pure pleasure, just lying down after a nice cool bath and a hot day in the shade, just enjoying. And so this is this beautiful image to describe this process and how it works in our mind. There's a slightly different format in this sutta and in this sequence of events. But just to know that these experiences are good and they're pleasant and they're what makes meditation worthwhile. And so we want to promote these good things because they draw us deeper into meditation. So we get this piti. The Buddha says, there's no need for us to wish, may my body become tranquil. So this is the next stage. When you have this rush of piti, very, very soon the body just goes and calms down. What's happening is the body is becoming tranquilized because of the interest that the mind has in the object. So suddenly we're looking at this thing on the inside for a change. We're not looking outside using the senses for our activity, for our excitement, for our pleasure. Instead, the mind is starting to move inwards. And so the senses start to relax and shut down a little bit. So this is what is happening when we experience this bodily tranquility. Our senses are becoming less heightened. Our senses are moving to the background. And this allows the senses of the body to let down their guard and for us to relax. And this bodily tranquility, with the senses becoming less active, less engaged, it's very beautiful. It's a nice part of the meditation to experience. I often liken it to letting the air out of a tire. You sometimes feel it in the body. It's like, shh. Body becomes really relaxed, really pleasurable. Having a relaxed body is so nice. Not having to go out to all the senses is so peaceful and blissful. It feels really good. So this stage of the meditation is really nice. You see that we're moving from the outside inward through pleasurable states. So the next state we'll experience after that beautiful bodily tranquility is sukha. That's bliss, pleasure, enjoyment. So this is why people meditate. They come back to meditation over and over again, is usually because they've had an experience of bliss, an experience of pleasure in the meditation. And for those people who've never experienced this, it's very sad and troubling, because they will always have to work really hard to get to the cushion. There'll always be this resentment and this reluctance about meditation. They won't enjoy the meditation. But when you have these pleasant experiences in meditation, where you feel good and you've enjoyed yourself, then you're more likely to go back to it, So it's good for us to develop these states of pleasant meditation based on the conduct that we have outside our meditation. So it's really good when you come to sit down in your meditation, you don't have any regrets. You sit down, you feel good, being a good person all week, you've kept your precepts, and then you go through these increasingly pleasant states. And so this bliss is what draws the mind into samadhi. It's this pleasant state that draws the mind deeper into stillness. Why? You don't want to go anywhere. You don't want to do anything. You're so happy. You feel so good. You don't want to go and have a cup of tea. You don't need to go and listen to music. You don't want to engage in conduct that's going to take you away from this good feeling. And so this is why bliss is really useful for developing samadhi, for developing meditation, because it trains the mind through these pleasurable states to stay very still and very peaceful. It trains the mind through pleasure to be present and stable, not through willpower or force, not through striving, but very naturally through these processes. So once that samadhi is there, things are starting to become really clear, really peaceful, really still, and we can see what's going on. We can see what's happening really clearly. And this is yata bhutan janami. This is when we are starting to see in accordance with reality. And so this, of course, is seeing things, as they are. We're seeing impermanence. We're seeing not self. We're seeing, suffering. We're seeing all of those things that the Buddha talked about based on this stillness. The deeper the stillness, the more sharp the clarity of our mind will be. So the more samadhi we have, the more insight we can develop, the more we'll see things in accordance with reality. Once we've seen things in accordance with reality, then what's the result going to be? Do you think we're going to, after having seen more clearly, after developing some wisdom in this way, do you think we're going to go back to being deluded? Do you think we're going to do things that are against these things that we've seen? This is an important part of the path to consider. Sometimes when you see something, you can't unsee it. You have some insight, you get some wisdom around something, you can't forget it. This is some sort of like positive trauma. We see how things really are. And seeing that, we can't forget it. Seeing that, something has changed. Something has to change. So what's happened is, when we see things clearly, we are disillusioned. We are disenchanted. The illusion, the enchantment that we've been living under, the ignorance that we've had, the delusion that we've been experiencing, this is suddenly taken away. This is shifted. And so this is nibbida. This is what happens when we see clearly. We start to develop nibbida. We are turning away. We are moving away from. We're no longer grasping reaching towards these things. We're no longer holding on so tightly. It's like when you have had too much chocolate, maybe. The idea, and you feel sick in your stomach, and then someone offers you another piece of chocolate, and you're like, no, actually, no, thank you. This is what nibbida is like. It doesn't have to be strong disgust. It's based on wisdom. It's based on understanding that seeing into the nature of reality, we start to move away from those habits and patterns of behavior, those ways of thinking that have kept us in ignorance. And so this is good. This is the movement away from suffering. And so once we've had this disillusionment, this disenchantment, then we develop viraga, which is dispassion, based on that nibbida. So it's natural. Once we've had that samadhi, once we've seen clearly, once we've seen through that illusion, naturally we develop dispassion, viraga. And so this is a kind of detachment. When it's used with the word nibbida, viraga means detachment, means we become less grasping. We're starting to let go. And so that's an important part of the path, that we no longer want to be involved. We're becoming distant from those things that we were involved with before. We see things completely differently now, and we can't go back. And then independent upon this viraga is the vimutti, the knowledge and seeing of our own escape, freedom that occurs based on this dispassion, based upon this this detachment. We've let go. We no longer want to be involved. Of course, this is the very high end of the path. This is the very end of the path. Vimutti Jnana-darsana, seeing knowledge and vision of release. This is synonym for enlightenment. So this is something that's pretty up there on the path. It's not something that I've personally experienced. But we can start to get an insight into how this is the result of all of these things. The natural result, the thing that will happen because of all these causes and conditions being in place. And so that's why the Buddha says at the end of this sutta that this freedom, this emancipation, this liberation, this enlightenment, this knowledge of our freedom and vision of release, this is the purpose and the benefit of developing viraga, dispassion. And viraga is the purpose and benefit of developing nibbida, disillusionment. And that nibbida is the purpose and benefit of seeing clearly, understanding the true nature of reality. And this is the purpose and benefit of developing samadhi. And that is the purpose and benefit of developing bliss. And that is the purpose and development of developing bodily tranquility, the kaya passaddhi. And that is the purpose and benefit of developing piti, that delight, that thrill, that rapture. And that is the purpose and benefit of developing pamuja, joy. And that is the purpose and benefit of having no regrets in the mind. And that is the purpose and benefit of having skillful ethical conduct. And so when you see it laid out like that, it all becomes very clear that this is why we need to develop good, wholesome practices outside of our meditation practice in our daily life. And by developing this ethical conduct, this is the first step, the most important step always the first step, the most important step on progressing along the spiritual path. And that's why I really enjoy this sutta, because it talks about these causes and conditions and the natural results that we can expect based on those causes, based on those conditions. And that's why I encourage you to really look at your ethical conduct, to develop it as much as you can, to become aware of it in a wholesome way, in a way that is positive, in a way that supports your practice, not in a horrible, nasty, self-flagellating kind of way, but in a way that makes you delighted to be practicing an ethical path and happy to be practicing a path that provides good results for you, good results for others, and which will help reduce your suffering, leading to pleasurable states that lead to the end of suffering. And so this is why I share this sutta with you today. And it's late, but we've still got some time for some questions. If you have some questions, it's good to make the questions about the topic that I've spoken about. And yeah, so I hope that this sutta will be of some benefit to you, and that it will help you in your practice. I'm just going to find the talk that I'm giving on YouTube so I can look at any comments that you might have. Okay. So as I mentioned, it's quite late, so I won't answer every question. It looks like a lot of questions. So, okay, here's one. I'm afraid if I am contented with my deeds, including wholesome or unwholesome, I won't improve and grow. That's why I'm critical with myself. Oh, Sally, you should be so happy. So happy. If you've done something good, rejoice in that happiness. So I think sometimes we've inherited this idea that we should have piety and false modesty, or that we should never be satisfied. Sounds very much like the Protestant work ethic that I learnt from my parents and society. Never be satisfied, never congratulate yourself. Just get on with it and try harder and do better and be better and just keep going and never rest. That's not what the Buddha taught. And actually, when you start to see the ramifications of that thinking, you can see just why it's not beneficial. Beating yourself up, it's not going to help you. It's just going to entrench these feelings within yourself. Our thoughts stain our mind. They dye the mind, If we keep on having thoughts of anger and ill will to ourselves, you'll see that that's how we often treat others as well. If we treat ourselves well, give ourselves a break, don't punish ourselves, then we are likely to be in a much happier place. And when we're in a happy place, we don't hurt others. And when we're in a happy place, we don't kill things or steal or rape or lie. When we're in a happy place, we don't need to do those things. We don't want to do those things. So it's good. If you can feel good about yourself, then that's pretty special already. But if you're feeling bad about yourself, then what's the point? What's the point of living a spiritual life if you feel worse about yourself? So the Buddha said that we should feel good. We should feel good about ourselves, our conduct. We should celebrate and make much of these states that are wholesome and positive, so that our mind inclines towards them. So over and over again, if we incline our minds towards these wholesome states, these wholesome activities, then we'll see the results of those wholesome states and activities in our own mind, that they're associated with good, that they're associated with the wholesome, that they're associated with coming out of suffering and the spiritual path, and that's why we can develop them. Gabriella says, when it comes to ethical conduct, what should we consider should motivate our reflection in Cetanākaraṇīya? Should the focus be on the good actions, good intentions, or the good results? Well, all of those things. When we're practicing Cetanākaraṇīya, we can reflect upon how we've maintained our precepts, if we've done that. And so that's the intention and the actions and the results all in one. You can focus on different parts of it. I should mention that it's quite a thinky type of contemplation. It's a recollection. And so at the beginning, at least, when we're practicing Cetanākaraṇīya, we're directing the mind. We're pondering, reflecting, thinking back over, remembering. And so it's maybe a bit more busy than something like breath meditation. But over time, I think what we want to develop an awareness of is not just the actions and the results, but the feeling associated with that good behavior, which is kind of something that goes a bit beyond words and beyond concepts. And that feeling will translate into those other aspects of that meditation, which is that joy will come up and then those other states will develop. So it's not something that you're trying to hold fixed into the mind and just stick the mind onto this one thing and hold it tight. Much more free-flowing, a bit more expansive. It's like, oh, I did that and I feel good. And there's some things that will really generate a lot of joy in your mind. So just my advice in regards to your question would just be to kind of play with it and see what works. And of course, remember that some things will work sometime and not work at another time. And so just have play. What if you had, and Gabriella's got a follow-up question, which is, what if you held your precepts and had the right intentions but did not have good results overall? Well, I don't think we can see those good results. They're still maybe coming along. Usually, if we have good intentions, we will experience those good results, because that's the nature of wholesome actions. And we will always experience wholesome results from wholesome actions. We will often experience unwholesome results from unwholesome actions. And the way we can do this is to test. If we've done something wrong, we can see how we feel. If we have done something right, then we can see how we feel about that. Sure, we can't control everything, and it might be that we've done something good and we've spoken the truth and it hasn't helped a person out in the world, caused some trouble for us. And I didn't really want to get stuck in this, but I'll just mention it quickly, because I think just reading in between the lines of your question, you're maybe thinking about how sometimes our practice of ethics is a bit grey, kind of, we're not quite sure, should we tell the truth? If we tell the truth, will another person get hurt? Or is it okay to put down a dog? If they're suffering, they have really a lot of pain. And so this is something probably important to cover in this context about the practice of sila. In Buddhism, remember I said at the very beginning, it's not commandments. It's not like thou shalt not do this, thou shalt do that. It's more what is beneficial, what is going to give rise to wholesome results. And sometimes this is going to be really complicated for you to work out. And sometimes it's going to be, you're going to have some flexibility. My experience, though, is when people have some sort of set rules that they follow really strictly, there's certain people who really delight in rules. They love rules. They love keeping rules. They get so into them but they become very inflexible and very intolerant of others. And they become sometimes kind of people who become very critical. They want to shame other people. They want to get them in trouble. And then you start to think, hey, what was the idea of this ethical conduct that we were trying to practice? So got to be careful with sila, that we don't become really annoying, bad people pursuing this ethical conduct in a way that becomes itself unwholesome. And so some people, they do that kind of thing with their sila. Other people will become really fixated on the rules in a way that allows them to find, like a lawyer, ways around a problem. So they know they've got this rule, but that's part of the fun, yeah? Because if you've got a rule, then there must be a way to come around it, And there's lots of ways that people do this in the monastic path. That we can't cut down trees ourselves, but we could maybe just make a bit of a small hint that tree is in the way, And this is a non-offense if we don't directly tell someone to cut down a tree or something. But other people will find sneaky ways around rules, So this is like being a lawyer. Maybe you want to find a way out for your client, But this isn't really a good way to practice either. And some people will have the other extreme where they just won't want to follow any rules, because rules are just bad. Rules are just rules, man. And no one's going to control me. This is another way that some people might practice. So the way to really practice well is to practice the middle path, to not get stuck in either of these extremes of really hyper, vigilance in a really negative way, or being too lax in another way, but just doing what you can in a natural way. And that's very important. It's got to be natural because it's got to be sustainable. So if people don't have this natural desire to follow a path of ethical conduct, they are forced to, or they've inherited it, or they just don't see the purpose of it, and they won't stick with it for a long time. So some people, I've noticed, if they're told that they have to follow all of these rules, they can become really quite stressed. And then if they break one of them or they can't keep it, then they just abandon the whole spiritual path. So it's got to be natural and it's got to be sustainable. So I don't know if I've answered your question at all, Gabriella, but I'm sure you'll have more questions another time. But I just wanted to mention that. So Sally's saying here, by acknowledging is total enough for correcting wrongness. I have stubborn ideas that I dislike and want to change that makes me improve. So in the Sutta, it never mentioned the not satisfying improving ways, like what society is doing. So morality in the Suttas, it has this combination of things which are kind of like what we call maybe like a natural morality, it's something that we can kind of feel inside, and also morality that's coming from outside. And we have the same situation today in our world. But the tendency that I was pointing to is this tendency quite a few people have of being overcritical of themselves, of being really hard upon themselves. And this is something that society has encouraged us to do. Because it makes us strive more. It's something that maybe our parents taught us when we were kids, something that we get rewarded for in workplaces or in schools, but it's not the way to develop naturally these beautiful states of mind. Because if you have a lot of anger and resentment and ill will towards yourself, then that's what you've got in your mind. Pretty simple. If we're sitting there hating ourselves, and this is the experience of a lot of meditators I've heard, they sit there and they judge themselves for the whole of the meditation. They tell themselves off for not being good enough. You can't meditate. You're terrible. You're a terrible person. You're horrible. No one likes you. And they talk like this to themselves. Which breaks my heart when I hear that this is the way people see themselves. It's really very sad, because, as I mentioned at the beginning, they're just seeing very small things about themselves, but making them huge. We've all got flaws. We've all got problems. And so if we only focus on those, then that's all we're going to see. But this practice, and the way I'm suggesting we kind of congratulate ourselves, enjoy the goodness that we have, this is inclining our mind towards wholesome states in a very gentle, very natural way. It's a good image to remember is we're watering the flowers. We're not watering the weeds. We keep on watering those weeds by paying them all this attention, then we're going to have more weeds, and we'll forget to water the flowers. But if we can keep on watering the flowers, then that's going to help the flowers grow. And if we don't give any water to the weeds, they'll naturally die off. But sure, if there's really stubborn, persistent ways of thinking, then that is going to need to be interrogated. If you have persistent thoughts of harm or obsessive thoughts, like a kind of kleptomania, like you really want to steal stuff all the time, then this is not going to benefit you or others, and you need to address those in different ways. There's many ways that we can work on our personality and all of those other things, but this is just one method that I'm presenting to you here in this sutta. And Dan, hello Dan, he says, you can't meditate. Well, meditate. Yes, it's Mara talking to you. Yeah. So that's one of the worst things. We judge ourselves for meditating. That's why I say it's okay to be gentle and kind, and to think in meditation. Sometimes if you're starting to develop those thoughts of judgment and harshness towards yourself, then it's useful to skillfully provide an antidote and just correct it. Thinking about your good qualities is a good way to get rid of those obsessive, judgmental thoughts and to cultivate those other qualities based on joy and happiness. Yeah, so we've got lots of judgment, and Jess is asking something. Would you, if you were judgmental of meditation, this is meditating correctly, not correctly? It's an extension of judgment of ourselves. Yeah, I don't think we need to judge ourselves in meditation. We don't need to measure. We don't need to compete. We don't need to compete with previous meditations that we've had. We just need to just be. And when we're just being, all the things that we've done beforehand will contribute to how we're feeling at that time. And so the purpose of this technique that the Buddha taught, Cetanākaraṇīya, and the purpose of developing these wholesome mind states is to acknowledge that these mind states are conditioned. So if we have things coming up that are unhelpful and unwholesome and not good, then they're also conditioned. We've been conditioning our mind. Society has been conditioning our mind to have those sorts of results. So we're working at trying to get rid of them. Laura is asking, is disillusionment a good thing? Well, Laura, yes, if it means that we're getting rid of illusion. So this is maybe just a kind of word problem. Disillusion has also come to mean depression and sadness and can't go on with life. Everything is horrible. We feel disillusioned. But another meaning of disillusion is that we are disillusioned. We are unillusioned, if you will. We've seen through the illusion. It's like that moment in The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy and the rest of her gang see the man behind the curtain, the Great Oz isn't really the Great Oz, but a little man talking through a microphone. And this is kind of like a metaphor for us discovering the illusion of reality, this illusion of self, this illusion of permanence. And we start to see through the suffering. And so this is a positive form of disillusionment. We no longer have our eyes covered by a veil. We've seen behind that curtain, and this is what it means to remove that illusion, to become disillusioned. Okay, so there's still more questions coming in, but it is getting quite late here in Sydney, so I do apologise that I won't have time to answer all your questions, but we've been going for some time now. So I want to thank again my friends, Bhante Sudaso and Ayasoma, for inviting me to be here with you tonight, or morning for most of you, I expect, and to thank them again for all their good work in spreading the Dharma. And I hope that all of your friends out there in the internet world are able to support you and your monastery through this difficult period, and to keep on supporting you as you grow in the future. And to all of the people who have tuned in, thank you very much for listening. And you can reflect later on how good it is that you listened to the Dhamma. And this is something which should bring some more joy into your heart. So wishing you all the very best, and please stay safe, please stay well, and help others if you can during this difficult time, and continue practicing well in the path of the Dhamma.